Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet. Jai Gurudev. We'll just do a bit of recap of Arjuna's surrender. So, not only had So I'll just go to this Atma Vichara. The basis for sorrow. Similarly, seeing simple pain, there is an empathy that turns into something else because a question has been triggered. This was in relation to the example of Buddha, Siddhartha, how he became Buddha. So he was a prince and had not seen death or anyone who was crippled, or perhaps since such events had not touched him personally, he had simply not paid any attention to them. Only when he began noticing them did the big question hit him. There is so much sorrow and pain in life. Can there be a solution? Having asked this question, it is said that he left the palace in search of the answer. When you go off in search of truth, you do not carry a truckload of belongings with you. Since he was interested only in truth, he just walked out. So, the basis for sorrow is similarly seeing simple pain. There is an empathy that turns into something else because a question has been triggered. In fact, all problems in life are connected to those that are much more basic. The basic problems being inherent in ordinary small problems. The small sorrows and pains, which are mental in nature, have their basis in the core personality. One who is angry becomes angry, and one who is not angry does not. Similarly, only the sad become sad. In order to determine why you are sad, a psychotherapist may take you into regression, back into a period of time when you picked up various notions about yourself and the world. In this way, your neurosis is accounted for, which is psychology. There is a core personality which is psychologically traceable by an informed specialist. So basically, all the simple pains and sorrows that we go through in life are actually based on this core personality. Tracking back, however, it itself is not enough. One more step has to be taken, a step that is psychologically fundamental. No psychologist says that it is improper to think that I am a mortal, that I am subject to sorrow, that I have to prove myself. I'll repeat this sentence. No psychologist says that it is improper to think that I am a mortal. So they think it is proper to think that I am a mortal, that I am subject to sorrow, that I have to prove myself. In fact, they all agree that you should get angry if the situation warrants it. Cry it out. Don't suppress it, they say. The teaching, however, says we must take one more step because there is a more basic problem that must be addressed. Because I am subject to sorrow is a basic problem, there is something more basic about you, which you had better know. Any small problem can be traced if you ask a few more questions. Inevitably, you will come to appreciate that there is a basic problem. If you ask the question, am I really sad? You end up reading the Gita because the Gita is the answer. The answer is not something you can figure out because if you are sad, you are sad. It is something that must be recognized. To ask, what is the basis of sadness? Means that it is something to be understood and not a particular condition or experience. The experiences of both happiness and sorrow have always been there, one alternating with the other. Now I am sad. Now I am happy. It seems, therefore, that happiness is a visitor and sadness is the person. You have to understand whether the self is subject to sorrow, what sorrow is, and so on. There is a whole gamut of questions involved here. A simple frown by someone can trigger some small pain in me. This can be traced to a fundamental self ignorance and self confusion, or at least a self question. Am I seeing myself rightly? This kind of questioning is called Atma Vichara and is what happened in Arjuna's mind. Therefore, he told Krishna that he was his Shishya and he wanted Shreyas. If you think the battlefield is not a good place for us to be in, then just drive the chariot somewhere else. Do whatever you like. I have handed over the horses and chariot to you. You decide if you want a quiet place, drive to a quiet place. And if you think you can teach in this din and roar, then I too can listen. I do not mind. Saying this and leaving everything to Bhagavan, Arjuna became quiet. So, although the basis of our joys and sorrows is based on the core personality, which is what the psychologist traces back to, it is not enough to just stop there. There's something more fundamental than just the core personality, and that is self ignorance, self confusion. And that is what is Atma Vichara. This kind of questioning is, what is the sorrow? And am I really sad? So these questions amount to Atma Vichara. And this is what Arjuna is going through. So having surrendered, now not only had Arjuna handed over his horses and chariot to Krishna, but also his life. Having found the possibility of a solution to his problem in the form of Shreyas and in the form of Krishna's teaching, Arjuna became silent. The storm in his mind had blown over. Although it was not enlightened, his mind was at least silent with some hope. Although the storm was over, Arjuna was still overcome with an intense inner torpor. Torpor is lethargy, inactivity. Where did it come from? He had been so enthusiastic, armed, and ready to fight. Now, right in the middle of the battlefield, his sorrow was so much that his eyes glistened with tears. When you are in sorrow, you are present as a whole person. In fact, sorrow cannot come unless you are there as a whole person. Some people have a feeling of deadness due to some emotional problem, and in order to relieve it, to feel alive, they work themselves into sorrow. Only then do they feel that they exist. Only then is there some reality for them. Artists sometimes have this problem. They feel dull and think they should be either ecstatic or in pain. They say that pain produces music or some other art form. However, it is not the pain that does it. It is because the whole person comes out of the pain and then something is produced. The result of such pain then becomes someone else's pain or joy, perhaps, depending on the product. Similarly, Arjuna became a whole person because a storm had occurred. There was now no chance of sleep or any other expression of torpor, only silence. Having found this possibility of a solution, there was a lull in his mind now that the storm had blown over. What a silence it was! Then Sanjaya said, तमुवाच ऋषिकेशः प्रहसन्निव भारत सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये विषीदन्तमिदं वचः Bharata, O Bharata, Ubhayoho Senayoho Madhye, in the middle of both armies, Vishidantam, the one who is sad, Tam to him, Rishikeshaha, Krishna, Prahasanniva, as though laughing, smiling. Idam, this Vachaha sentence, Uvacha said, Bharata, Ubhayoho Senayoho Madhye, Vishidantam idam विषीदन्तं तं ऋषिकेशः प्रहसन्निव idam vachah uvacha. O Bharata, to him who was sad in the midst of both armies, Rishikesha, Krishna, as though laughing, said these words. In this verse, Sanjaya addressed Dhritarashtra as Bharata, a name that applied to all of these people, including Arjuna and his brothers, because they were born in the Bharata family. He told him that Lord Krishna, about to respond to Arjuna's silence, was as though laughing. Why did he not simply say Krishna was smiling? There being an opportunity for interpretation here, many interpretations have been put forward. Was Krishna smiling because he had been waiting for this day? Previously, Arjuna had used the words, my chariot. Now Arjuna had surrendered an attitude which Krishna would no doubt have found preferable. Krishna was quite satisfied with the outcome of Arjuna's outpourings. The discussion had not been just a simple dialogue with a person in despair. Arjuna had asked to be Krishna's Shishya. Perhaps Krishna was smiling because it was now going to happen. Whatever the reason, Krishna was smiling. The knowledge he was about to teach was not a grim knowledge. He did not have to say, please listen to me. I am a Vedanti and this is a very serious matter. You are all bliss, all fullness, all ananda. Please, therefore, do not take this knowledge lightly, etc. The subject matter being what it was a smile, laughter, all the way. We find that Krishna always had a good time while teaching Arjuna, whereas Arjuna, of course, did have a hard time now and then. One can find a number of different meanings for this expression as though laughing. Prahasanniva. Krishna did not drive the chariot to a quieter place. He kept the chariot where it was, right in the middle of the battlefield. For gaining this knowledge, you do not require a particular time or place. You only require a particular person or persons. There should be someone like Krishna who, in the din and roar of the battlefield, had all composure necessary to talk to Arjuna. Arjuna too had the necessary composure to listen to Krishna, and the appropriateness of his questions indicates that he listened well. Therefore, who is learning and who is teaching are important, whereas the time and place are not. So, this beautiful knowledge is something which is very light and happy. It is not something which is serious, which is why Krishna had this as though smiling face, as though laughing. And right throughout the Gita, Krishna had this composure. He was so centered, whereas Arjuna was getting all confused. So many times he got confused between karma yoga and sannyasa. So, therefore, to learn this knowledge, what is important is there's a teacher and the taught. Time and place are not important. There is a situation. It only requires a particular person or persons. So, therefore, age is not a bar. Time and place is not a bar for this eternal knowledge. What we require is just a Krishna and and Arjuna. The teaching begins. Because the words to be spoken by Krishna to Arjuna comprise the teaching, the Gita is said to begin with the next verse. Krishna began by telling Arjuna that there was no reason for grief. Ashocyan anvashochastvam, and concluded the Gita saying, grieve not, ma shuchaha. In between, there is only removal of grief, or more accurately put, removal of the reason for grief. The cause of grief, ignorance, and error is removed totally. Therefore, the entire Gita Shastra is a Shastra which removes sorrow, shoka. Sorrow refers to any complaint, any uneasiness about me, centered on the self, is sorrow. Physical pain is not sorrow, but complaining about such pain is sorrow. The problem is in thinking that everyone else is well and I am not. This self centered sorrow, shoka, is purely the brood of ignorance, wrong thinking stemming from wrong notions about oneself and the world. Krishna's words, Bhagavan's Gita, addressed this very problem. I will repeat this paragraph again. In fact, the first two. Because the words to be spoken by Krishna to Arjuna comprise the teaching, the Gita is said to begin with the next verse. Krishna began by telling Arjuna that there was no reason for grief. Ashocyan anvashochastva, and concluded the Gita saying, grieve not, ma shuchaha. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tva sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami ma shuchaha. This was the last verse of the Gita. So he starts with Ashocyan and Vashochastvam. There is no reason for grief. And then he ends it with grieve not, ma shuchaha. In between, there is only removal of grief, or more accurately put, removal of the reason for grief. So that fundamental problem of self ignorance is being addressed there, as that is the removal of grief. The cause of grief, ignorance and error, is removed totally. Therefore, the entire Gita Shastra is a Shastra which removes shoka, which removes sorrow. Sorrow refers to any complaint, any uneasiness about me, centered on the self, is sorrow. What a nice definition of sorrow. So, any uneasiness about me, which is centered on the self, is sorrow. Physical pain is not sorrow, but complaining about such pain is sorrow. Which is why Gurudev says pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The suffering is the sorrow, which is a complaint, which is complaining about the pain. And that is any uneasiness about me, which is centered on the self. So pain is inevitable for the physical body. But whether or not you suffer is an option, because you can choose not to complain about that physical pain. The problem is in thinking that everyone else is well and I am not. This self centered sorrow, shoka, is purely the brood of ignorance, wrong thinking stemming from wrong notions about oneself and the world. Krishna's words, Bhagavan's Gita, address this very problem. So the whole fundamental problem is about wrong thinking.
Hariom, that again brings back to that question, why me? That silly question.
Yeah. Why me? Why am I? Why me? Why am I miserable? Not why am I miserable. Why me is you're saying that you are going through difficulty, everyone else is fine. That's coming out of that, and therefore one becomes sad.
Which is the last verse that you spoke? You just chanted, no? That
Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. Aham tva sarva papebhyo moksha ishyami ma shuchaha.
which is that verse? Which chapter?
The last chapter, 18th chapter.
No,
I
the
don't
last.
remember the last verse. Must be the 17th verse. Yeah.
Yeah, something. Not the last verse. Okay.
The last verse is actually Sanjaya. Yesterday
Sanjay, yes. That is
so,
what. Okay.
so one of Bhagwan's last verses is this.
Mhm.
So sorrow refers to any complaint, any uneasiness about me centered on the self is sorrow. Physical pain is not sorrow, but complaining about such pain is sorrow. The problem is in thinking that everyone else is well and I am not. This self centered sorrow, shoka, is purely the brood of ignorance. Wrong thinking stemming from wrong notions about oneself and the world. श्रीभगवानुवाच अशोच्यानन्वशोचस्त्वं प्रज्ञावादांश्च भाषसे गतासूनगतासूंश्च नानुशोचन्ति पंडिताः. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha said, Tvam you, Ashocyan, those who should not be grieved for, Anvashochaha, grieve, Prajnavadan, words of wisdom, Bhashase, you speak, Cha and Panditaha, the wise, Gatasoon, those from whom the breath has left, Agatasoon, those from whom the breath has not yet left, Cha and Na Anushochanti, do not grieve. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Tvam Ashocyan Anvashochaha Prajnavadan Bhashase Cha Panditaha Gatasoon Agatasoon Cha Na Anushochanti. Shri Bhagavan said, you grieve for those who should not be grieved for, yet you speak words of wisdom. The wise do not grieve for those who are living or for those who are no longer living. Arjuna, confused about dharma and adharma and overwhelmed by sorrow, became a shishya and asked for Shreyas. Wanting to help Arjuna out of his sorrow for good and knowing that relative Shreyas was useless here, Krishna's teaching was for imparting self knowledge alone. The subject matter of the remainder of the Gita is self knowledge, Atma Jnana, the cause for the removal of sorrow. Shankara's commentary starts with this verse since it marks the beginning of the teaching. While the word Tvam, meaning you, refers to Arjuna, it can also apply to any second person. The word is significant given that the whole Vedanta Shastra is nothing but that thou art, tat tvam asi. The first 6 chapters of the Gita deal with you alone. What is you in the equation tat tvam asi? You are that means you are equated to that. That has to be presented, and the meaning given is the Lord Ishvara. Therefore, Tat Tvam Asi means you are Ishvara. That there is a difference between you and the Lord is obvious. But because the statement Tat Tvam Asi is an equation, it seems as though you are equated to the Lord. The vision of the Shruti is that you are that Ishvara who is the cause for the entire creation. That Brahman you are. The Tattvam Asi equation is a statement, a vakya of this vision. There are two elements involved here. One is Ishvara, the Lord, which is the meaning of the word Tat, and the other is the Jiva, the individual, which is the meaning of the word Tvam, you. Unless the meaning of you is properly understood, the equation cannot be understood because there is a contradiction. If the statement, you are Brahman, were to be a self evident fact, there would be no necessity for the teaching at all. Since, however, there is a contradiction between Jiva and Ishvara, we have to resolve it. Unless there is absence of contradiction, there is no identity. Unless you recognize the real meaning of the word you, which means I. There is no way of discovering the identity between you and Ishvara that the Tattvamasi equation reveals. Therefore, the first 6 chapters of the Gita emphasize you. The next 6 chapters deal with that, the Lord, and the last 6 chapters deal with the identity between the two. You will find as you proceed that the whole subject matter in the 7th chapter changes and that the last 6 chapters are significantly different. Arjuna's sorrow is your sorrow. Arjuna's sorrow, the subject matter of the first chapter, is the sorrow of any jiva, the individual, one who is subject to sorrow. That Arjuna was sad is not unusual. In fact, we are all with Arjuna. His sorrow seems to be very legitimate. If this situation could not cause sorrow, what could? We can well appreciate and sympathize with Arjuna because, for much lesser reasons, we find ourselves in even deeper trouble. This is the condition of the jiva. That the jiva is desirous of getting rid of sorrow is also obvious.
Can you
Generally,
speak about that Tattvamasi, that difference between Swam and all that? That one paragraph, how it is compared with the Brahman and all. Means it is a comparison there. In the
let me just
previous word.
reading this
Oh,
para and we'll go there. Generally, people seek relief through escapes. What is significant here is that Arjuna wanted to resolve the sorrow for good, which is the reason we have a Gita. We have a Gita Shastra. Arjuna was told straight away by Krishna, you, Arjuna, grieve unnecessarily. Over the shoulders of Arjuna, you too are being addressed. You too have entertained sorrow, the state of mind known as shoka. So, going back to this shloka, Sri Bhagavan said, you grieve for those who should not be grieved. Yet you speak words of wisdom. The wise do not grieve for those who are living or for those who are no longer living. Arjuna, confused about dharma and adharma and overwhelmed by sorrow, became a Shishya and asked for Shreyas. Wanting to help Arjuna out of his sorrow for good and knowing that relative Shreyas was useless here, Krishna's teaching was for imparting self knowledge alone. What is relative Shreyas? We have seen before, right? Absolute Shreyas and relative Shreyas. Absolute Shreyas is that which is good for all universally, irrespective of time, place, and person. And that is removal of the fundamental error. That is self knowledge. The Atmajnana is absolute Shreyas, whereas relative Shreyas is at one particular time it might be good for you, another time it may not be good for you. Example given was the medicine. Sometimes poison is used as medicine. So when you're afflicted by it's a certain disease, it would help you. So here Krishna is not giving Arjuna relative Shreyas. Arjuna wanted to know, why am I sad? Why am I the sorrow I'm not able to handle? Please help me out of this confusion. The subject matter of the remainder of the Gita is self knowledge, Atma Jnana, the cause for the removal of sorrow. Shankara's commentary starts with this verse since it marks the beginning of the teaching. While the word Tvam, meaning you, refers to Arjuna, it can also apply to any second person. The word is significant given that the whole Vedanta Shastra is nothing but that thou art, tat tvam asi. So, where is this word tvam that came in? See, tvam. Ashochan anvashochastvam, tvam, there. So, you, that you is addressed to Arjuna and all of us who are Arjunas. So you are, so that you has been addressed there, so that the word tvam meaning you refers to Arjuna.
You read one more time all the meaning and the song. Praja something after that word. You read it already, right?
Which one?
That the padartha, like can we one
Yeah.
time just
Sri Bhagavan Vacha. Sri Bhagavan said, tvam, you, ashochan, those who should not be grieved for, anvashochaha, grieve, prajnavadan, words of wisdom, bhashase, you speak. Cha, and Panditaha, the wise, Gatasun, those from whom the breath has left, Agatasun, those from whom the breath has not yet left, Cha, and Na Anushochanti, do not grieve.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I missed that part. Thanks.
So you grieve for those who should not be grieved for, yet you speak words of wisdom. The wise do not grieve for those who are living or for those who are no longer living. So, while the word tvam, meaning you, refers to Arjuna, it can also apply to any second person. The word is significant given that the whole Vedanta Shastra is nothing but that thou art. Tat tvam asi. The first 6 chapters of the Gita deal with you alone. That what is you in the equation? Tat tvam asi. You are that means you are equated to that. That has to be presented, and the meaning given is the Lord Ishvara. Therefore, Tat Tvam Asi means you are Ishvara. That there is a difference between you and the Lord is obvious. But because the statement Tat Tvam Asi is an equation, it seems as though you are equated to the Lord. The vision of the Shruti is that you are that Ishvara who is the cause for the entire creation. That Brahman you are. The Tat Tvamasi equation is a statement, a Vakya of this vision. There are two elements involved here. One is Ishvara, the Lord, which is the meaning of the word Tat, and the other is the Jiva, the individual, which is the meaning of the word Tvam, you. Unless the meaning of you is properly understood, the equation cannot be understood because there is a contradiction. If the statement, you are Brahman, were to be a self evident fact, there would be no necessity for the teaching at all. Since, however, there is a contradiction between Jiva and Ishvara, we have to resolve it. Unless there is absence of contradiction, there is no identity. Unless you recognize the real meaning of the word you, which means I, there is no way of discovering the identity between you and Ishvara that the Tattvamasi equation reveals. Jiva and Ishvara, there is a distinction, isn't it? That is why they are given as two separate entities. Jiva is subject to sorrow. Jiva is subject to limitation. We have seen in Tattva Bodh, what does the Jiva say? Jiva says, Aham alpajnaha, aham kinchignaha. Whereas Atma is sarvajnaha, sarvavyapi. So we, in the mold of Jiva, have this distinction that I am different, Ishvara is different. But the whole Vedanta is saying, Tattvam asi, that thou art. So therefore, it's important for us to understand what I or you is, that Tvam. Although it seems like a sentence, it is actually an equation. They are equating, the Shruti is equating you to Brahman. You are the cause of everything. You are the cause of creation. So therefore, the first 6 chapters deal with Tvam. The next 6 chapters deal with Tat. Therefore, the first 6 chapters of the Gita emphasize you. The next 6 chapters deal with that, the Lord, and the last 6 chapters deal with the identity between the two. Sarlaji, is that fine?
Yes, yes, clear. Thank you. Till you don't know you cannot be that.
Yeah. Because the fundamental problem is of wrong thinking, no? The wrong notions.
Correct.
It reminds me of that example Nanaji had given, no? In the herd of sheep, the lion cub was lost, and when he was shown his true face, he did not know who he was actually.
Yeah.
No, this is an equation, means x is equal to y, or x is equal to y, z is equal to y, therefore x is equal to z. So therefore we have to define x plus and y, and we have to know z also. That's how it is solved.
In last,
See, x is equal to y is equal to z, and therefore x is equal to y is equal to z. That's a equation. He says, no, that is equation. Good, wonderful. Thank you.
so in last 6 chapters, he said no, the identity is the same. You and he, means you and that.
Arjuna's sorrow is your sorrow. Arjuna's sorrow, the subject matter of the first chapter, is the sorrow of any jiva, the individual, one who is subject to sorrow. That Arjuna was sad is not unusual. In fact, we are all with Arjuna. His sorrow seems to be very legitimate. If this situation could not cause sorrow, what could? We can well appreciate and sympathize with Arjuna because, for much lesser reasons, we find ourselves in even deeper trouble. This is the condition of the jiva. That the jiva is desirous of getting rid of sorrow is also obvious. Generally, people seek relief through escapes. What is significant here is that Arjuna wanted to resolve the sorrow for good, which is the reason we have a Gita Shastra, which is why Arjuna asked Krishna, please give me Shreyas. What is best for me? Teach me that. Arjuna was told straight away by Krishna, you, Arjuna, grieve unnecessarily. Over the shoulders of Arjuna, you too are being addressed. That is, all of us are also being addressed by Krishna. You too have entertained sorrow, the state of mind known as shoka. What is deserving of grief? Shocha is that which deserves grief, that which is legitimate basis for sorrow. In society, we have universally accepted that certain events are matters for sorrow, while others are not. For example, when someone is about to be married, we do not send condolences. We send congratulations. Marriage is a matter for joy and laughter, not for sorrow. This is the case in any culture. For a death, on the other hand, even when there is relief involved because the person was suffering extreme pain and required constant care, there is at least a tinge of sadness when someone dies. Therefore, death is synonymous with mourning and can be called shochya universally. There is also personal shochya. You may be sad because of something that has come or gone, whereas another person may not be sad at all. A man may be very happy that his mother has come, whereas his wife is a pack of nerves. For him, the event is not shocha, but for her, it is a great shocha. Because this woman has walked into their home, one person becomes a pack of nerves. The other is ecstatic because he can show off his accomplishments to his mother. The event is the same for both of them, but for one person it is shocha and for the other it is ashocha. Thus, we find that some things are shocha universally and others are shocha only for an individual. Culturally, there may also be peculiar situations that are shochas. In some cultures, the birth of a girl is shocha, whereas in other cultures, the birth of a boy may cause sorrow since too many boys are definitely a problem. Thus, an object of sorrow, shoka, is called shocha, just as an object of knowledge, jnana, is called jneya. An object of sorrow means a situation that causes sorrow, be it an event or an experience. A situation that does not cause sorrow is called ashocha. Here, Krishna's contention is that whatever may be the situation, you have no legitimate reason for grief. In the coming verses, he will establish that there is no legitimate cause for sorrow, both from the relative and the absolute standpoints. What a whiplash. I mean, he's given the highest knowledge in just this, the first opening statement. There is no legitimate cause for sorrow, both from the relative and the absolute standpoints. So I'll just repeat this paragraph again. So we understood, right? What is deserving of grief? What is shocha? Is that which deserves grief, that which has a legitimate basis for sorrow. So we have some universal shochas and some personal shochas, relative shocha. That is the same event. Death, for instance, universally, although there is some relief to that person who's died because he was suffering with a lot of pain, there is a relief on his part. But there is a tinge of sadness that everybody experiences when you hear of death. Right? That is universal shocha. Whereas personal shocha is like the example given here. The mother-in-law is coming home. The daughter-in-law is a pack of nerves, whereas the son is all very happy. So this is relative and it is personal. So this depends on time, place, and the individual, the person, although the event is the same. And similarly, culturally, there may be differences, like birth of a daughter, birth of a son might cause shocha. So
We can say
shocha,
that
huh?
this Shaucha and Asocha is a Mansik piece. Is it not? Correct? Shaucha and Asocha is thinking only here.
No, shocha is the cause for sorrow. Shoka is sorrow.
Hmm.
Shocha is the cause for sorrow. See, the object of sorrow is called shocha, just as an object of knowledge, jnana, is called jnana.
Hmm.
An object of sorrow means a situation that causes sorrow, be it an event or an experience. So the situation that causes sorrow is called shocha, and a situation that does not cause sorrow is called ashocha. So Krishna's contention is that shoka is your mental state, is the result of this ashocha, the shocha, right? So there is an object of sorrow and there is sorrow. Here, Krishna's contention is that whatever may be the situation, you have no legitimate reason for grief. Such a powerful statement. No matter the situation. And here in the Bhagavad Gita, the highest death that causes no it causes universal shoka, right? Death is such a thing, is shocha, is universally everybody feels the pain and sadness of death. So it is taken to the highest point of the situation, the worst situation that can cause shoka is taken up, and he says you have no legitimate reason for grief, even given the situation. And in the coming verses, he will establish that there is no legitimate cause for sorrow, both from the relative and the absolute standpoints. The wise do not grieve. Here, Krishna told Arjuna that he had picked up sorrow where it was not warranted at all, and that people of knowledge, Panditas, do not entertain any grief. Panda means self knowledge, and a Pandita is one in whom self knowledge is born. Panda Atma Vishaya Buddhihi Esham Te Panditaha. Panda is self knowledge. The one who has the self knowledge is a Pandita. Panda Atma Vishaya Buddhihi Esham Te Panditaha. Krishna also acknowledged in this verse that although Arjuna was grieving over that which did not deserve any grief, he had also spoken words of wisdom. Bhagwan remembered all of Arjuna's words from the first chapter when he spoke so eloquently about who would go to Naraka and why the Dharma would be in trouble, etc. While acknowledging the wisdom of Arjuna's words, Krishna told him that people of wisdom do not grieve. Arjuna was not a wise man, and that was his whole problem. Krishna knew that all he had to do was make Arjuna a Pandita so that he would not see a problem where there wasn't one, as he was presently doing. The sorrow itself was unwarranted, which was why he was aggrieved. With reference to what do the wise not grieve? Lord Yama, death can interfere at any time. There are many breaths, and any one of them could be the last. One breath alone does not last for 80 years. Between every inhalation and every exhalation, there is a gap. Therefore, how do you know which breath will be the last? Only when the next breath comes do we know that the last breath will was not the last. The verse makes a distinction between one who has breathed his or her last and one who has not. Gatasoon, agatasoon. Men of wisdom do not entertain any grief either for the dead or for the not yet dead. Why was death referred to here? Because all of Arjuna's arguments revolved only around death. He was always talking about the imminent death of his teachers and members of his family. Destruction was involved because there was a battle ensuing. This was one reason. In addition, death is the only event that uniformly, universally evokes sorrow. We would never send condolences to the bereaved unless we knew they were sad. On the other hand, if the survivors were sometimes happy, we would not automatically send condolences. We would have first found out whether they were sad or not, and if not, if they were happy, we would have to send messages of congratulation. Without even a thought, however, we all send condolences because death is an event that universally evokes sorrow. To use an analogy of why death was used here, a boxer who wants to become the heavyweight champion of the world has only to fight one person, the present champion. All he has to do is knock him out and he will become the world champion. Similarly, if death is one event which invariably evokes sorrow in all, with reference to which the wise do not grieve, certainly the loss of hair or the loss of a relationship or marriage will not be the cause for sorrow. Finally, death is a particularly appropriate event to use in a discussion about sorrow and its removal when what is to be discussed is Atma, which is not subject to death. Krishna told Arjuna that anything he might look upon as a source of sorrow was not, nor would any wise man look upon anything as a source of sorrow because there is no source of sorrow. We'll stop here today. So, very beautifully derived why death was taken, why this last breath. People who've taken the last breath, that is, people who've died, and people who've not yet died. So, there is no reason for you to grieve. The wise do not grieve. So, the example taken is that of the situation that evokes universal sorrow. So, any other situation automatically means there's no need for sorrow, there's no need to grieve. Like in the example, the boxer, one who wants to become the the champion, he need not box everybody, all the boxers in the kingdom, in the country. He just needs to knock off the present champion. And then he becomes the reigning champion. Likewise, when you do not grieve death, then you do not, there is no need for you to grieve for anything, any other situation that is less than death. And all of us are caught up with so many situations in our life which is less than death. And we are caught up in that. Ashochan anvashochastva. Prajnavadamscha bhashase. Gatasun agatasunscha nanushochanti panditaha.
So the reason you don't be feeling sorry because talking about Atma not subject to death. That what the reason is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But then the question about breathing, not breathing in this particular verse, so they're still alive.
Gatasun is the one who has taken his last breath.
Oh, Gatasun. Agatasun.
Agatasun, he is still not taken his last breath. He's still breathing, he's still living.
Okay. The Tasun is who took the loss.
Yeah. So the wise do not grieve for those who have dead and gone, neither do they grieve for those that are living.
Okay. Either way, you're grieving. Tasun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else wants to add anything before we close?
He says sorrow doesn't exist on you.
Yeah. So Shankara's Bhashya starts from the 11th verse of the second chapter. Because this is where the Gita teaching begins. So we've actually landed in the portals of the Bhagavad Gita right now. Till now, it was only the backdrop. The backdrop of the whole thing was given, and now we are into the Gita. So we'll do this source of sorrow from tomorrow. Okay.
That last verse is 18 chapter 66 number. That's a good one. Yes, good one.
See, finally, death is a particularly appropriate event to use in a discussion about sorrow and its removal when what is to be discussed is Atma, which is not subject to death. Krishna told Arjuna that anything he might look upon as a source of sorrow, that Shochya, was not. Nor would any wise man look upon anything as a source of sorrow because there is no source of sorrow. Period. He's just drawn the line there. Right. We'll stop here. We'll continue tomorrow. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.